she just browsing? Oh. Oh, okay. That wasn't gonna work. It just wouldn't work.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Here at Source Booksellers, we are a nonfiction niche, and we are very pleased to present Sean King with his newly released book, Make Change. We are very excited that everyone is joining us now, and we're going to start just in a few moments. Pleased to present Sean King with his new. Sorry about that. So if you are new to Sean King, he is a writer, a civil rights activist, and the co-founder of Real Justice PAC. We are very grateful to him recently for all of his and Real Justice PAC's attention to Detroit's elections and our real need for a new attorney, a new prosecutor. And so we're very grateful for that. And I'll say that both of us, my mom and I, were both connected also to Sean King because we're Spelman alum, and he went to Morehouse. So we're proud to introduce our Morehouse brother. Oops. Did you want to say something?
Well, welcome, Sean King and all the people who are viewing. We're so happy that you're with us today. And Sean King, I'm a bit older graduate of the AU Center schools. And so I've been really impressed with all the work that you've been doing. And you've done so much in communication and in some of the other media that we have. What in the world ever made you think about writing a book?
Oh, that's a great question. Allison, are you able to show my video?
That is what I'm trying to do.
Okay. We're almost there. You unmuted me. If you
Okay.
you should be a little mark where you're allowed to start the video. You all can hear me though.
I can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can hear you.
Yeah.
Great.
And I see your video is off, but I think you have to control your video.
No, it says I cannot start the video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah, if you just click right there. So good to see both of you. It's always a little creepy when somebody can see you and you can't see them.
Okay. Okay, I'm still working on it.
We're gonna work it out. Yeah, yeah, we're gonna work it out just fine. Good to see you and your mother, and and my wife is a Spelman graduate.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
You should be able to.
oh,
Yes. There we go.
there you go.
Let me see if that works for me. There we go. Yes, there we are. Yeah. So Allison, so good to see you and your mother
Good to
and
see
your
you.
team. Yeah, your mother asked the question, what made me write a book? And one, writing a book is I will never look at books on shelves the same again. The effort that it takes to write it, to edit it, to produce it and get it out will forever change the way I see anybody's book. Um, I wrote this book really for one primary reason. I traveled since the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. I've traveled now to 47 different states, from North and South Dakota all the way up to Alaska and Hawaii, all over the deep South, deep into the Mississippi Delta, South Carolina, Alabama, all over the West Coast. And in my travel through 47 of our 50 states, I always, over the past 6 years, got some version of the same question. It was some version of, hey, Sean, I am so frustrated about injustice, so frustrated about racism and bigotry in America, but what do I do about it? Or how can I use my life to do something about it? And everywhere I traveled, I would always try to give people a 2-minute answer or a 3-minute answer. And I would do my best to kind of condense my thoughts into like a short, quick response. But the truth is, it's hard to tell somebody how to use their life to change the world in like a soundbite or in a tweet or a simple Facebook post. And this book, in a lot of ways, is my answer to that question: how to use your life, your skills, your passions, how to use those things to make a difference in the world. I tell the story of how I've tried to use my skills and passions to do the same thing. And it's just my detailed answer on how people can do that. Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear you speak about books. Uh, they certainly are much more than they appear.
Sure.
And a very easy thing to say, oh, I'm going to write a book. Well,
Right.
that's
Right.
fine for your friends and relatives and neighbors and friends. But the production of a book includes the author, but it's not only the author.
Oh, no,
And the
absolutely.
book industry is global.
Yep.
And there's so many parts to it. And we are so lucky at this time this time to have such a huge number of books that speak to this issue that you've been speaking to. And if
Absolutely.
Allison hasn't told you, I can tell you that we've had quite a experience with people wanting to know, wanting to understand. So I'm grateful for you and your book, and I think it's going to do very well.
Well, I appreciate it. And I see what you're seeing. I feel like at no point in my life have I seen more people trying to understand, why does our country work the way it works? What is systemic racism and oppression? How do we use our lives to combat these things? I've never seen more people sincerely interested in reading hard truths. Like, people are getting the some of the most difficult scholarly books on issues of police violence and race and racism. And so I feel like our national IQ has gone up several points over the past few months in a way that's different than anything I've ever seen before. I think some of it is because we are in this pandemic. People are more stationary, and people are willing to be kind of to take deep dives into topics in a way that I don't know that we would have seen if the pandemic had not hit us. And I'm in Brooklyn right now, and you all are in Detroit, and the coronavirus pandemic ravaged both of our cities. And so I don't speak of that lightly. I know the impact. I even did several eulogies for men and women who died in Detroit and over the past few months. And so I know how hard it's hit. And you all have probably had customers and family and friends who have been impacted. But I wrote the book in part to give people a clear, detailed answer on here's how you can tilt your life to actually changing the systems that seem almost unchangeable in this country.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you very much, Sean, and good wishes and carry on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
So we have people kind of rolling in a little bit.
Yeah.
Would you like to start?
Yeah. I'm ready to roll. And I'm gonna in a few minutes, I'm gonna read an excerpt from the book. I'm gonna teach some of the key lessons from the book. And then in a few minutes, if you'll come back, I'm going to take as many questions as I can as well. And if you have questions, Allison, or if your mother has questions, or anybody here in the chat has questions, it's 12 after the hour for me, and I can go for a little less than an hour, and then I'm speaking at another brilliant Black-owned bookstore in Washington D.C. at Mahogany Books in
Oh,
DC.
we love
Yeah,
them.
so yeah, they're great people. And so we're trying our best. So everybody who's here in the chat or anybody who sees this later, please, please, please support your local bookstores for all of your literary needs. This is what's helping keep our treasured bookstores alive and healthy. And so thank you all for having me. And I'm glad that there are some people here and they can get my book from you all even here. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Well, in the store, on Source Booksellers online. And the event bundle has closed, but on our store website.
Okay, good. And
I'll be back.
good.
Just to let everybody know, there's a question and answer. It's not a chat, but it's a question and answer place on
Okay.
this Zoom, and you can write your questions in there, and then maybe we can preview them and just kind of keep it going like that.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
All
thank you,
right.
Allison. Yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me. Everybody is so good to be here with you all. I love Detroit. Detroit was one of the first big cities. I grew up in Kentucky. And for those of you who already have the book, I'm going to read some excerpts to you in a few minutes. But I grew up in rural Kentucky and I could not wait to get out of where I grew up in. It was actually, for me, it was a brutal, difficult place to grow up. I tell some of the traumatic stories, and I'm going to read one of those stories to you in a moment. But I joined a church in Lexington, Kentucky, and got a chance. My pastor was friends with several pastors in Detroit, and we would travel up to Detroit sometimes to attend church revivals and other things when I was a teenage boy. And I remember thinking like, this is the city I want to live in when I grow up. And I grew up watching even TV shows like Martin and other things. And nowadays when there are sitcoms and movies and things and they show people, they may or may not live in Detroit, but Martin took place in Detroit. And Detroit for me was always a place of rich culture, and it still is of rich culture and of really good people, and just the city just has such a rich history. And I know I've been to Detroit probably 20 times across the years, more than almost any other big city that I've been to, and I've seen it go through all of its highs and lows and ups and downs like any city. The community I live in now here in Brooklyn, where I am, I'm actually speaking to you from this is the basement of of our house. our office in Brooklyn for the North Star and Grassroots Law Project, our office has been closed since March, and almost nobody here in New York is going to offices. As you all know, nearly 30,000 people died here in New York alone. In my community, just in the neighborhood that I live in, several hundred people died, including people just blocks away from us. Business owners and entrepreneurs have struggled to recover. And so before we begin, just thank you to Source Booksellers. Thank you to Allison and her family and staff and team. And thank you to all of you who are here. It means the world to me to be able to spend this time with you. My book was supposed to come out in April. And at that time, New York was, I want to say at the height of the pandemic, but what I really mean is kind of at our lowest. It's hard to describe with words how bad things were here, where over 1,000 people a day at its worst were dying just here in the city. And you could hear sirens going 24/7. We were afraid to even leave the house. And we had already booked a book tour to 30 different American cities. We had sold tickets all over the country, and we had worked for months on that tour. And I remember how brokenhearted we were to cancel the tour. And eventually we decided to cancel the release of the book, in great part because bookstores all over the country, including the major named bookstores and local bookstores, had all been shut down. And all summer, I regretted that my book was not out as a tool and a resource for people to use as they organized there in Detroit and all over the country. I've seen your organizations, I've seen your protests and demonstrations. I worked hard. Allison talked about it just a little bit. I worked hard alongside a brilliant young leader that I hope someday the city will elect. Her name is Victoria Burton Harris, and she ran for Wayne County prosecutor just this past week. And she actually won voting on election day, but lost early voting. And so she did not win in that race. But part of why we endorsed Allison is because of some stuff I talk about in the book. We're trying to change America's justice systems. And I say that in a plural sense. There's not one justice system in our country. Instead, really, there are about 30,000 little ones. Each jail is a system. Each police department is a system. Each prosecutor's office is a system. And if you add up all of the jails, all of the prisons, all of the police departments and sheriff's offices, you add up all of that, there are nearly 30,000 different little systems. And the good news and bad news is the good news is that you can change those systems one at a time. And we've now elected new prosecutors in over 20 cities, including, and we hoped so badly that Detroit would be our next one, but we've helped to elect new prosecutors in Boston, in San Francisco, deep in Jackson, Mississippi, in San Antonio, Texas, in Philadelphia. We're working on races now in Orlando, in Honolulu. We're working on races all over the country. We helped elect the city prosecutor and county prosecutor of St. Louis. So we're doing great work all over the country. And today I want to tell you how we came to do some of that work, some of the walls that I hit in pursuit of fighting for change, some of the mistakes that I've made. I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. For those of you who don't yet have the hardcover copy, I can't wait for you to get it. It was a labor of love. You may have heard me say that I literally traveled to almost all 50 states, 47 states. The book says 45, but I traveled to 2 more before the book came out. And so I'm up to 47 of the states where I've organized, taught, learned, and studied how does change actually work. And there are a few big ideas that I want to teach you tonight so that I know that if you leave this, that you weren't just inspired or motivated or interested, but that you learned something. The first idea is a lesson that actually took me years and years to learn. And it's a bit of a warning sign even for where we are right now. In 2014, I was actually not even doing what I'm doing now. I was not an organizer. I had been an organizer. I had organized justice, the fight for justice for a young man named Amadou Diallo, who was shot at 41 times by the NYPD when I was student government president at Morehouse in Atlanta in 1999. Um, we fought back when a young man named Sean Bell was shot 50 times on his wedding day. That was in 2006. We organized for some young boys that we called the Gina Six. I worked alongside Trayvon Martin's family in 2012 and 13, trying to fight for justice for their family. But in 2014, I was actually doing something very different. I was the director of communications for an international charity called Global Green. And a good buddy of mine that I went to Morehouse with, which was at that time 15 years earlier, sent me a message on Facebook. And it sounds crazy now, but that message that he sent me on Facebook, he was not even like my best friend at Morehouse. He was just a good guy that I knew from Morehouse, but he knew that I had fought against police brutality before. I actually worked for almost 3 years in Atlanta's jails and prisons. I traveled to 13 different jails and prisons full time every day as a traveling teacher. And that was in 2005 and 6 and 7. And so he knew me as somebody who fought back against police brutality and mass incarceration. And he sent me this video, and we didn't even know the man's name yet. And he told me that something horrible had just happened on the streets of New York. And there was a video on YouTube that was spreading. And what we didn't know at the time was that it was Eric Garner. And it was the video of Eric Garner literally being murdered. And this sounds crazy today, but in 2014, in July of 2014, when I first clicked on and saw that video, there had never been a viral video of somebody being killed by the police. Now, even myself, I've seen nearly 500 videos. You all have probably at least seen a dozen or more and could name many of them. But at that time, there had never been a viral video of somebody being killed by the police. And I was so shook up by it and disturbed by it, as we all should have been. And I began just trying to figure out, how can I do something for this man, for this man's family? How can I help them fight for justice? And it took me down a rabbit hole, not just for that day, but really for my life, of trying to figure out for the next 3 weeks, how are we going to get justice for this man, Eric Garner, who had been murdered? I came to know Eric's mother, Eric's wife, Eric's children. I became good friends with his daughter, Erica Garner, who died herself when she was just 29 after years and years of fighting for justice for her father. Just 3 weeks after Eric Garner was killed, 3 more young Black men were killed. Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. A young brother named John Crawford was killed at a Walmart in Ohio. And a young man named Ezell Ford was shot and killed by the LAPD. And suddenly, in a 3-week span, you not only had those 4 brutal incidents of police violence. What we were coming to learn is that American police actually killed people 3 or 4 times a day, every single day. We didn't know, there had been no real database yet tracking it like that. We didn't even know it then that it was so frequent. We felt like it was, but the database, which later would go on to win awards and widespread recognition, just had not been created yet. And so as we fought for justice for those 4 men, in November of 2014, a 12-year-old boy named Tamir Rice was shot and killed. And I got on the phone, and I even tell this story in the book. I got on the phone with Tamir's mother, Samaria, and his uncle, her brother, who was really helping the family through the grief that they were experiencing. And you have to understand, for families, these aren't news stories. These are their sons. These are their husbands, their fathers, their brothers. And for them, they're processing the grief of the loss. And I've walked hundreds of families through this process, and it's an unspeakable loss to have your loved one killed by the people that you yourself pay supposedly to protect us. And I said something to Tamir's family that I said to many families that I later came to regret. I said to Tamir's mother, hold on, hang in there. We're going to get justice for your family. And I could hear the despair in their voices. And I had been a pastor for many years. I've been a pastor for almost 15 years myself. And I was wanting to encourage her. And I was wanting to find words that I thought would give her hope and her family hope. And so I said that, hold on, hang in there. We're going to get justice for your family. And there was not a single part of me that assumed I was overpromising something that we couldn't deliver. I could not imagine that the police who killed a 12-year-old boy, who was a class clown, who was a jokester, who still dreamed of playing professional ball like every little boy does, I could not believe that there would be no justice for Tamir Rice. And when I told Tamir's family, hold on, hang in there. We are going to get justice for your family. I meant it. It came from a sincere place, like it was earnest. I knew that we were fighting so hard. I couldn't believe that we would fight so hard and not get it. Not just for Tamir, but for Mike Brown, for Eric Garner, for John Crawford, for Ezell Ford. In fact, over 1,100 people were killed by police in 2014, and not a single family, not 10, not 5, not 2, not 1, 0 families got any semblance of justice out of 1,100, which really almost mathematically is an impossibility. What we came to understand is that it was 0.00% of people being held responsible because that system was not designed to give us justice. It was designed to oppress us. It was designed to brutalize us. And now that we were trying to squeeze this system to give us justice, it would do nothing of the sort. It didn't mind convicting us. It didn't mind brutalizing us. And when people needed to utilize the system to convict us, to charge us, to arrest us, to brutalize us, it did that with ease. But now that we needed to turn this system back and have it give us justice, we quickly learned that it was not designed to do that. And I learned a key lesson that is heavily on my mind right now. And I talk about it deeply in this book. And it's the first big lesson that I want to share with you all tonight, is that this country, including right there in Detroit, this country is fully willing to be totally aware of our worst problems, of racism, of bigotry, of police violence, of mass incarceration. This country is fully willing to have the most heightened awareness ever. I don't know that America has ever been more aware of its problems than it is today. The awareness, literally, it's been measured and polled. It's as high as it's ever been. But I need you to understand, and I've experienced the painful side of this, that this country is fully willing to be aware of its problems and do nothing about them. We experienced that with Tamir Rice. We experienced it in 2015 with Sandra Bland, with Freddie Gray. We experienced it in 2016 with Alton Sterling and a brother named Terrence Crutcher, who was a twin brother of my friend Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, who was murdered by police in Oklahoma, by Philando Castile. I said this again to another family. Hold on. Hang in there. We're going to get justice for your family. And I could not fathom that Philando Castile's family would not get justice. Could not fathom it. And yet there we are. The family got no justice, nothing like justice. And so many thousands of families experience that because awareness is not change. Awareness of a problem, it's vital, it's essential, but awareness cannot be a substitute for action. Do you hear what I'm saying? Awareness is a poor substitute for action and change. In fact, awareness is just laying the groundwork for change. It would be as if you haven't had dinner tonight, if you dropped your plate on the floor and it had your dinner on it and the plate shattered and your food was on the floor, being aware that the plate has shattered and your food is on the floor is not the same as cleaning it up. And America often, this country, Detroit, Michigan, when I think of Flint, right now, there is a brother that I have grown to love, almost like a father figure to me, named Michael Thompson, was convicted 25 years ago for selling weed in Michigan, where it is now legal to sell weed. He sold weed to an undercover operative in a setup. He didn't even know. Didn't even plan on selling this weed. They set up a fake deal and he sold weed to an undercover operative. And he has been in prison for nearly 25 years in Michigan. And we have done everything to make your governor, who is now lifted up as a Democratic Party superhero, we have begged her to release Michael Thompson from prison. She is, listen, fully aware of the injustice. While Michael has been in prison, his mother died. His only son died. He's had siblings pass away. Michael is now in a hospital with the coronavirus that he contracted in prison. While Michael Thompson has been in prison, for selling weed, he saw men come in there who were convicted of sexual assault and murder, come in and serve their entire sentence and be released while he's still there. Michael has been in that prison for so long. He saw men come in as guards, start their career and retire. That's how long he's been there. Your attorney general has now said that Michael should be released. The district attorney of Flint has now said that Michael should be released. The governor is fully aware of it. That's what I'm trying to say. The governor is fully aware of the problem, but awareness and action are not the same thing. And we need to understand that a lot of people will try to convince us that they are hearing us, they are seeing us, but we want more than to be seen and heard. We want systems changed. And to change those systems, awareness is like not even step one, it's step zero of a multi-step process that I detail in the book. I hope this is making sense. Thank you all for being here. I hope you can hear me clearly and that this is making sense. I am a preacher at heart, and so I normally would love to hear feedback and approval. But if it's resonating with you, please comment here in the captions that you're understanding what it is I'm trying to say. Awareness is not action. Awareness almost always precedes action, but it does not guarantee action. And what I came to understand is that in Cleveland, where Tamir was killed, in Ferguson, where Michael Brown was killed, in Los Angeles, where Ezell Ford was killed, in New York, where I live, where Eric Garner was killed, those cities were willing to be aware of the pain, but they weren't willing to actually do something about it. And this book is an answer to what we do, not just to the pain of police violence and mass incarceration, but to the problems that break your heart. And one of the first things that I ask you to do is to decide what the issue is that breaks your heart. So for me, it is police brutality and mass incarceration. But my wife is a literary expert for young children. She has been an elementary school teacher for nearly 20 years. She's been an educational executive and administrator. And her passion is teaching children to read. They're wildly different than my passion. But you have to pick a cause. You have to pick a mission. And until you plant your feet and decide what your mission is, what your cause is, you will always be frustrated. always say that this thing burns you up or angers you or boils your blood, but you have to actually say, I'm putting my feet down and doing something about this. And in one of the early chapters of the book, and I'm about to read an excerpt from the book, if you don't mind, I say where my passion for justice came from. And then I take you on a journey trying to help you discover your purpose, your passion, and your cause in the next chapter. So I'm going to read an excerpt to you from mine. And thank you all so much for being here. This is probably one of the most painful chapters of the book for me to write, and I stopped and started it many times. The chapter is called My Story, and I wanted to share my story with you so that you would really understand how I got to be not just in the position that I'm in, but arrived at using my whole life to fight for justice. I'm going to read a little bit at the beginning, and then I'm going to skip a few pages and finish the story. This is chapter 2, called My Story. I need you to go back in time with me. Before Trump, before Obama, before Twitter, before Google, before Netflix, before text messages, way before all of that. I need to take you back to March 8th of 1995. Apartheid had just ended, and Nelson Mandela was in his first year as president of South Africa. Tupac and Biggie were still alive at the top of their game. And on a random spring afternoon during my sophomore year of high school, everything changed for me. If getting that Facebook message about Eric Garner in July of 2014 altered the trajectory of my adult life, then no single moment in time impacted my young life more than what I'm about to tell you. It almost ruined me. But had it not happened, I'm completely sure my life would have taken a very different path. Let me take you back. I'm going to read a few more paragraphs here, and then I'm going to skip ahead. Man, look at those stupid rednecks, always messing around and shit, I said to my friend LaRon as we glanced at a fight that seemed to have broken out among the future farmers of America. Fights like this were far from rare at our rural high school, the only one in our small factory and farm town of about 8,000 people. It's Versailles, Kentucky. Somebody always had a beef that they wanted to settle and fight through. And on this day, the rural farm boys had clearly had some type of falling out with one another. LaRon and I chuckled, half glad that it had nothing to do with us for a change. Let me skip ahead. That's on page 35 that I just read from. I'm going to skip ahead. I tell a lot of important history of my town, but I want to skip ahead to the moment that I want to tell you about. My homie LaRon and I were in a good mood that fateful Wednesday afternoon. The hardest part of our school day was over, and we were just shooting the shit and chilling out at what we called the Black Hangout spot before I had to head out to band class. Of course, there were no colored only signs for us at that spot, but like clockwork, before school started, between classes and after the final school bell rang, if you had a drop of melanin, you hung out in the corner by the entrance to the gymnasium. It wasn't special, but damn it, it was ours. This was where we lovingly cracked jokes on one another, talked about which girls had the biggest booty, which was a big deal to us back then, and argued over whether or not the East Coast or West Coast hip hop was better. For all I knew, that little spot by the gym had been the Black hangout spot for decades. If I didn't stop, the walk from our hangout spot to my band class normally only took about 30 seconds. If I busted a fast jog, I could do it in less. Had I known that I was about to meet my maker, I would have brought LaRon with me on that journey. He was a big dude, barrel-chested, a linebacker on the football team. Also jolly as could be, but somebody only a fool would cross. Me, on the other hand, in spite of my growth spurt, I was still smaller than Allen Iverson. I was scrappy and fit, but those two qualities didn't strike fear in anybody. When I turned around to give LaRon some dap and told him that I'd see him later, I had no reason to second guess myself. I had made that brisk walk from the gym to band class hundreds of times over the previous 3.5 semesters, and those treks were consistently uneventful. This was my safe hallway. I could think of 10 different places in the school that felt dangerous to me, but that path was simply not one of them. My guard was all the way down, even though there was a rowdy group of rednecks fighting ahead. As I got closer to the group of about 15 or 20 people, something peculiar happened. The crowd, which had just been unruly enough for LaRon and me to comment on a few minutes before, grew eerily silent. It was unnerving, but I didn't know what to make of it as I had to walk and move through them. Suddenly, I heard a voice in the crowd say, "That's him." Another said, "Yeah, that's Sean King," before a third voice yelled, "Go." That crowd that LaRon and I had chuckled about wasn't there because they were fighting one another. They were there for me. In seconds, I was surrounded on every side by a group of bloodthirsty country boys, without a friend in sight or a teacher to intervene. Before I had time to thoughtfully consider an exit, I felt a wallop against the back of my head, as if I had been hit with a baseball bat. Strangely, I felt no pain. While the blow did not knock me out, it knocked every bit of intelligence out of me. Like most young boys in the 90s, I watched every Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal movie ever made up until that point. VHS tapes of Lionheart and Hard to Kill were in heavy rotation on the 13-inch TV VCR combo that my mother bought me for my bedroom. I would watch those fighting movies alone and reenact the fight scenes with regularity, even making the clumsy noises along with Jean-Claude when I would kick the crap out of my invisible enemies. On this day, though, not a single lesson that my martial arts heroes taught me mattered one little bit. Soon I felt blows hitting my face and stomach and ribs and back from every angle. I could hear the thuds of fists against my flesh and bones. My glasses went flying off my face. I was blind without them. I didn't tell my body to crumple, but it seemed like I was no longer in charge of what it did from that point forward. I instinctively curled up into the fetal position and tried to cover my face as steel-toed work boots punted and stomped and pounded my body. It seemed as if time had slowed to a snail's pace, and my mind began drifting somewhere strange. Blow after blow continued to rain down on me, but I was growing numb and distant from it all. I knew instinctively that something terrible was happening, but I soon found myself not even caring about it. Darkness began enveloping my mind. I was drifting out of consciousness. And then I heard a girl screaming at the top of her lungs. Days later, I learned that it was my good friend Joyce, who realized that it was me on the ground getting mauled. Joyce's screams, I'm almost finished. Joyce's screams caused enough of a commotion to attract teachers to the scene. When students told Mr. Carter, who was our band director, that it was me on the ground, he too entered the fray to help break it up. He made sure Joyce and other band students who were caught up in the melee all went safely back to class. As teachers and staff swarmed in and intervened, every student who punched and kicked me fled, mainly to a wing of school that I had never once ventured into that was designed for agricultural studies. Amid the chaos, and it's hard for me to believe that this happened, I was somehow left alone on the floor, bleeding, beaten, and barely conscious. I struggled to get to my feet and began shuffling toward the front office before I eventually collapsed along some lockers. It sounds silly now, but I remember feeling crushed that blood covered my brand new tennis shoes. Money was hard to come by in our house, and I typically only get one new pair of shoes per year and could not believe that mine were now covered in blood. I could not will myself to get up no matter how hard I tried. Thankfully, one of my best friends, Rico, a pudgy comedic brother who doubled as my barber, found me there, laying up against the lockers, mumbling incoherently to myself. He helped me up and virtually carried me down 2 long hallways to the administrative offices at the front entrance to the school. Once we made it there, I literally collapsed in the middle of the lobby before they dragged me into an office. That's obviously one of the most painful moments of my entire life. And I could not imagine that was 25 years ago. I'm 40. I was 15 at the time. I didn't know then that that moment that was really meant to break me, and it did break me in a lot of ways. I had 3 spinal surgeries. I missed the rest of that year of high school and then all of my junior year of high school recovering from the injuries. And I was also just deeply wounded emotionally and mentally. I was diagnosed with PTSD. Each surgery was painful. I had severe damage to my spine, broken ribs, fractures in my face, and recovering from all of that was brutally difficult. I had a single mother who was struggling just to pay the bills, and I can't even put words on how hard those 2 years were for us. What I didn't know was that that painful moment, which was awful in every way, put in my heart a huge, huge place for people who are hurting, for people who are in pain, for people who've been brutalized and experienced injustice. This moment that was meant almost as a thoughtless moment from these young students who did this to me, nobody was ever held accountable for anything. It changed the entire trajectory of my life and took me off of the path that I was on and put me on a real path to being somebody who would not only care about injustice and justice, but would eventually dedicate my life to doing it. And so much of who I am comes from that moment. And what I ask you in the following chapter and in the chapter after that is, what are the moments that your story hopefully doesn't sound like my story, but what are the moments that you've had that can give you insight into who you are designed to be on this earth, the cause that you should take up and make your own. And I ask you to interrogate and investigate your own story. Your story will give you clues to the cause that you need to choose, the fight that you need to be in. And it may not always come out of a place of pain like mine. I hope it doesn't. But your life is leading you somewhere. And part of what I hope and pray for, sorry to be religious in this moment, but I hope and pray that your life leads you to changing the world, to making it a better place. In chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I get hyper specific on the decisions you need to make to actually change the world. And I hope that it's a guide for each of you. I want to take some questions. I have probably a little more than 20 minutes. Hi, Allison. A little more than 20 minutes to take as many questions as we can. We see a few of them here in the Q&A now. And yeah, there you go, Allison. And I'll try to answer as many as we can. So if you have more, just put them here in the Q&A for us.
Okay, let's start with Beth. Which do you think has been more informative more formative in informing your views on making change? Your formal education, um,
Mm,
familiarity with a culture, or a gut feeling?
that's a great question. Let me answer that one. Thank you, Beth, for that question. Beth again asked, like, what was the most formative part of my life? The formal education. My formal education actually had a huge impact on me. Allison will know. Allison would probably say the same thing about her life. Like my time at Morehouse has everything to do with who I am today. It wasn't just my classroom time, which was beautiful, but at Morehouse I got to be a leader. As you just heard, at my high school, I could never be a leader. At Morehouse, I was the president of my dorm. I was student government president. At Morehouse, I was a speaker on our biggest stages, but I also had just rich conversations with um, the young men who lived in my dorm or who stayed on the floor. And so my formal education has a lot. I went to grad school for history as well. So all of that impacted me. But I think there's a balance between the formal education that I've had and kind of my lived experience. I told you for over 3 years, I worked full time in jails and prisons every single day. It was brutally difficult and deeply insightful. This was before we even were using the words mass incarceration. Like we didn't even the book, The New Jim Crow, wouldn't come out for 5 more years, and maybe more than 8 more years after that experience. And so we didn't have the insight into the problems and even some of the roots of mass incarceration back then. Um, Even traveling to those 47 states, I learned lessons that I probably couldn't have learned in the classroom, that I couldn't have learned even like on my job or doing the work that I do. Traveling to all of those places and seeing the country gave me a lot of deep insights. To make that relevant for everybody who's here, um, everything shapes you, your education, your experiences, your travels, but you have to have kind of an open heart to learn. You have to listen more than you speak. And so I've learned, the more I've listened, the more I've learned. And the funny thing is I probably listen now more as a 40-year-old who has slowed my life down. I have 5 kids and a family, and like so I listen more now than I ever have, and so I'm still learning every day. I'm still reading, still studying, still researching, and that hunger for knowledge I think fuels a lot of what I do. Yeah, thank you, Beth.
Um, Sarah, Sarah N is saying that you are a true treasure, and she's so grateful, as I am, that we're living at the same time, that you're leading and you're educating. She expresses that she's got some severe health issues,
Mm.
but she wants to know how, um, at times when we have a
Uh-huh.
lack of victory, how do you not feel completely crushed all the time? And also, she's weeping more often than not at this point, because it seems like there's a constant horrific tragedy. I
Yeah,
hope I'm saying this right, Sarah.
yeah. No, you said it right, Sarah. Sarah, thank you. Allison, thank you. Um, Michelle Obama has a new podcast, and she said to her interviewer, Michelle Norris, who's a good friend of hers, she says something. It doesn't surprise me in a practical way. It kind of surprises me because we never hear a former first lady say this. But Michelle Obama said that over this year, she felt like she had been in what she called a low grade depression. And she used that word very earnestly, like she meant it. And she explained what she meant. Um, Sarah, it's a good thing. Not that you are weepy, not that your soul is crushed. I wish that there were no things to crush your soul or make you weepy. But what that means, what I see, Sarah, is that means you have a heart. It means that what is a tragedy still feels like a tragedy to you, it means that you have not grown completely numb to the injustice of this moment. Sarah asked, how is my soul not completely crushed? Sarah, it is. These moments are soul crushing for me. I think I talk about this some in the book. If I have one thing that is a double-edged sword for me that helps me and hurts me, I take the pain of all of these families personally, as if it was my family. And because I take it personally, that's what fuels me to keep going over and over again. Just today, a new family reached out to me who had experienced just a grave, unspeakable injustice. I just shared yesterday online on Instagram and elsewhere a horrible um, a video of a man named Shaheen Mackey who was brutally murdered at a jail in Pennsylvania. He committed no crime, broke no law to even warrant that violence, and his family is devastated. And so, what's good about that is it connects my heart to these families' heart, and I work with the family of Ahmaud Arbery, of Breonna Taylor, of George Floyd, and others, and I make their pain my own. But the flip of that is that's a lot of pain to absorb. Um, I have a therapist that I see and speak with. I talk about that in the book as well. My family and I also have a family therapist where we do family therapy. And it's not because we're what we would call dysfunctional as a family, although all families have dysfunction, all humans have dysfunction. The world is just so hard. And a therapist is just a guide. Um, I think our nation, particularly communities of color and doubly so Black people in America, probably have a national case of PTSD, of all the trauma and all the pain that we've grown to experience. And Sarah, when you're a feeler, that pain, you feel it personally. So my heart goes out to you. Thank you for the question. I try to balance it. The final thing that you asked was, how do I remain hopeful? I answered that in the book, and history makes me hopeful. Now, that may surprise you to hear, but when I study history, every horrible low moment in this nation's history, it has always fought through and somewhat recovered from. We've never reached a mountaintop where our nation is whole and ethical and all. We've never reached that. But there was a time where people were bought and sold and traded as property. That ended. There was a time where no Black people could vote, no women could vote. Those things have ended. There's still grave injustice, but we have fought back from some of the worst things that have ever happened to human beings. And I think we'll do the same thing here. This country will always have deep injustice. It will shape shift and change. But I believe that even the movement we're in right now, I believe that we'll achieve many of our goals and continue to fight through it. Thank you, Sarah.
We have Ellen, and Ellen says, do you feel that things like signing petitions or going to rallies, does that help affect change?
Yes and no, Ellen. That's a great question. Signing a petition and going to rallies, I would put those in two different buckets. There are petitions that you can sign that sometimes don't mean a thing. Sometimes they can give you the feeling that you've done something when you haven't necessarily done anything. Like at our organization, the Grassroots Law Project, when we have a petition, we call it a super petition. It's something we designed ourselves. When you sign our petition, it then emails every elected official that we want to email in that case. So our organization took on the case of Ahmaud Arbery. And when you filled out our petition, and millions of people completed our petition for Ahmaud, every time you filled out a petition, it emailed 20 different elected officials in the state. And that had an impact. The thing is, even when you are a demonstrator at a protest, it's hard to say if that single action, it's hard to see with your eyes how it mattered. but it's about all of our collective energy and action combined. So yes, if you yourself didn't attend the protest, maybe everything would have continued just as it was. But if everybody thought like that and no one attended the protest, then it would have no impact. Yes, if you didn't fill the petition out, maybe everything would be just like it is. But if nobody filled it out, then the collective power is lost. And so you have to have hope in the reality that you are a part of a collective push for justice. And sometimes you play a small role, and sometimes your role may be more significant. I would want all of you to do more than petitions and rallies, but petitions and rallies are absolutely vital. And I hope that you could join organizations that are doing the work. And I talk about how you can find the next steps for you to take, Ellen. I talk about that a lot in the book.
And we have one, maybe this is the last one, because I know our
Okay.
time is getting short for what you
Yeah.
need to do next.
Thank you.
This is Winston. Given that a lot of organizations or companies are being plagued by white dominant culture, microaggressions, and oppression for BI, BIPOC.
It's a new acronym.
I feel
Well,
old.
yeah. Well, we are old.
Black,
We are
Indigenous.
old. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
people of color.
That's
Okay.
right. Black, Indigenous, people of color. That's right.
What concrete steps would you suggest for these organizations or companies to help them ratify this?
That's a great, Winston. Thank you for that question. I spoke last night. We did a book event in Chicago, and somebody asked a similar question because in their corporate culture, they're often, even the word corporate is often code for whiteness. When people say corporate, what they often mean is a variation or form of white culture, white style, white leanings, and there are pressures for all people of color in corporate environments to code switch, to suppress their own culture, their own style, their own values, to kind of fit in a place. And there are often, as you named, microaggressions and other things. I would go back. I've gotten to be good friends with Dr. Ibram Kendi over the past few years, and he is like world renowned now. And I'm glad that I knew him before his latest book blew up. It's How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I think over 1 million people have purchased it here over the past few months. And there's a key concept that he has in the book that I'll use to answer this question. Um, he says something that some people have even pushed back on. I believe he's right. He says that racist policies are what undergird and support and fuel so much racism. Now, he is keenly aware people create policies, but it's racist policies that protect racist systems, racist structures, and racism inside of corporations. And the core idea of How to Be an Anti-Racist is that as a person, and the same is true as a corporation, you are either racist or you're anti-racist. But most Americans don't say that they're racist or anti-racist. Most Americans say, I'm not racist. And the core idea of his book is that not racist is not real. You're either racist, knowingly or unknowingly, or anti-racist, which is a knowing position. And so corporations have to develop anti-racist policies. What they've primarily done is create like not racist policies. And what he's saying is that's not really a proactive thing. Corporations have to do the hard work. HR offices, policymakers, presidents and vice presidents and corporations, executives have to say, how can we develop policies and create systems that are explicitly anti-racist? And that's hard work. And hopefully, the whole burden of doing that will not be put on Black people alone. That's often what happens after major acts of injustice happen in this country, the burden of fixing it all is put on the victims of the system in the first place. Black people don't mind being a part of the solution, but white people are going to help, are going to have to rather help lead the charge of creating anti-racist systems and instituting those anti-racist systems as well. I see it happening. It's beautiful, necessary, difficult work, but we have a lot more to do for sure. Yeah,
Okay,
thank you, Allison.
I know time is short, but we have Rana from London in the
Uh-huh.
United Kingdom, and she said the death of George Floyd served as an impetus for the Black Lives Movement here in the UK. And how can we ensure there is more of an international focus on other issues such as mass incarceration?
That's great. That's a great question, Rhonda. How even even now, those who are viewing and watching may have heard there are incredibly difficult things even going on right now in Zimbabwe. Um, there obviously, if you've seen, there are huge struggles going on in Beirut right now in Lebanon, where tens of thousands of people, some people say nearly 100,000 people, are now homeless in Lebanon. Their port, which was their biggest port of entry there in Beirut, has been destroyed, and it's where food enters into the country. All of us could do more to have a sharper international perspective of the world. And it's hard. It's hard in one country to really know and understand the systems of another country. And so I saw all the protests happening all over the UK after the murder of George Floyd, and was touched by those. But I think it can even be difficult for somebody who lives in the UK to understand how our systems and structures work, just as it can be difficult for me to understand the systems of policing and inequity um, all over England. And so some of it is it is again studying, researching, understanding the systems that undergird that. And it's also some of the beautiful part of the Black Lives Matter movement is that activists in other countries are forming deep, meaningful relationships with one another, and it's out of those relationships that people can really begin to understand. Like, I used to think, for instance, Rana, that there was no police brutality in the UK. Now, while hardly anybody is shot and killed by police in the country, people are still killed by police. It's on a smaller scale, but there is still widespread non-fatal police brutality all over the UK. And I didn't know that. And while it's drastically less than what we have here, it's still a real problem. And so that comes from relationships as well. Yeah, I hope that answer was insightful in some way.
Well, how are we doing with time?
I can take one more question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ginger was being kind to us, saying if we didn't have time, if you needed to go, she would have her question passed. But do you see it?
Yeah, I see it. Uh-huh. Ginger said, since therapy could be invaluable for persisting in social activism, what would I recommend to encourage folks to be more open to it in underrepresented communities, which are often dissuaded from seeking help due to cultural mental health stigmas? That's a great observation and thought there, Ginger. Um, a lot of people, including myself, even when I have a moment where I say, hey, I have a therapist, and that my family has a therapist, one of the greatest people to advance the idea of and necessity of seeing a therapist has surprised me, and it's been Charlemagne the God, who is the co-host on the Breakfast Club. He has made it his mission to talk about mental health in Black communities, for Black men and women. He's brought on experts, and he has helped to loosen the lid on the jar. You're right that there has been historically a stigma where we didn't fully understand the mental health crises in our neighborhood, in our families. People were not properly diagnosed, and so we would just say so and so has a crazy uncle, or like little, like things that were pejorative, but we didn't fully understand what we were dealing with. And that's changing. It's changing specifically with a younger generation, even of artists in hip hop who, I mean, I'm talking about everyday artists now, talk about their mental health challenges and problems in ways the hip hop I grew up on, you would never confess that you had any mental health challenge or any challenge in the world at all. And hip hop today, a lot of artists are talking about it. And even that makes the barrier smaller. Now we have to make sure that the access to mental health resources, to therapy, the barrier is not so high. It's why we fought for Medicare for all or universal health care. Every developed country in the world, literally, has universal health care for 100% of its citizens, and almost every country covers mental health. In the United States, we now have over 50 million people who don't even have health insurance. And those of us who are lucky enough to have it pay an outrageous amount for it. I can hardly afford it from month to month. And then still copays to see a therapist are so expensive. And it's even for my family been so expensive that at times I would not see a therapist so that other members of my family could, because we couldn't afford for everybody to see a therapist. And that's me, a person of means and privilege. And so you could imagine the barrier for others is very high. There are some charities that are doing great work. There's some therapists and some organizations. One is called Black Men Heal, that's even providing free services. And there's a comparable organization for Black women as well. And so there's a lot of work to do there. I think the stigma is coming down. It's still there, but now we also have to make sure that the barrier and the access, the barriers come down and the access is better. Yeah, thank you, Allison. Yeah, I appreciate you all. I do have to run, but it's been my honor to be here with you all tonight. All of you from Detroit, and Allison, to spend a few minutes with you and get to say hello to your dear mother as well.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and having this book. We wanted everyone to know the sun has come in on us now.
I see. Yeah.
But we want to send all of our greetings to Mahogany when you get there.
Yeah.
We're family owned, we're Black owned little bookstore, and so we're chugging along just like them.
Yeah. Woman owned.
We have more books on more books for Make Change for sale on our website. So if you didn't get it in your ticket, you can always still get it from us.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all. And good to see you both. And good to see everybody here. It's been my honor to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Take care, everybody. Yeah. Bye now.